Welcome back to another episode of Glitch, Grind, Glow, where we break down tech, entrepreneurship, and how to survive the wild ride that is the tech industry. If it is your first time tuning in, welcome. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode or an update. Like and comment so we can learn more about your experiences as well as topics you want to see more of. And if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back and thank you for supporting my channel. Today we're tackling a topic that haunts the dreams of developers everywhere: tech interviews. You know, the soul-crushing, mind-boggling experience where you're pretty sure you just blacked out for an hour and maybe invented a new sorting algorithm. Creating this episode is important to me because I want to empower aspiring tech professionals with the tools and confidence they need to succeed in the often intimidating world of tech interviews. Having given over 100 software and systems engineering interviews, I know firsthand how challenging it can be to navigate coding challenges, answer tricky behavioral questions, and assess a company's culture. By sharing strategies and insights, I hope to help others approach their interviews with clarity, stand out for the other employers, and ultimately land the roles that they deserve. It's all about building the next wave of tech innovators and leaders. So if you've ever walked out of a tech interview feeling completely dejected, I'm about to hit you with some surefire tips to ace that tech interview. And trust me, they don't involve magic or selling your soul. Well, maybe a little bit of magic. So let's start with the basics. You're sitting in front of someone from Google, Amazon, Meta, insert intimidating tech giant name here. And they hit you with a coding problem that feels like it's from another planet. Why? Because it probably is, or at least it feels that way. Tech interviews are often split into two parts: the coding question and the design or the theoretical problem. One is meant to see if you can solve problems efficiently, and the other is to determine if you can think like an architect building software from the ground up. Both are often equally important. No pressure, right? Now, the coding question is usually the part where you sweat a little and suddenly forget how to write a basic for loop. If this happens to you, don't worry, you're not alone. The trick here is not just solving the problem, but also showing how you think it through. This isn't about getting the right answer, like as fast as possible, like you're in a speed coding championship. They want to see your thought process. What questions do you ask? Do you break the problem down logically? Take a deep breath, explain your logic. Even if you're wrong, but you're logically wrong, that's still a win. And trust me, you will get some wild design problems. Like the time I got asked how many gas stations there are in the United States. First of all, what does that have to do with tech? Second, I was just trying to figure out if I had accidentally signed up for a statistics exam. The point is, these seemingly crazy questions are designed to see how you approach the impossible. They want to watch your brain do gymnastics. So just stay calm. If you have no idea what they're asking, ask clarifying questions. Focus on the requirements. This isn't the time to panic and think you're doomed. Then there's the design problem, the part where they want you to pretend like you're building Netflix from scratch or something like that. Welcome to the realm of software architecture. Common architectures like the publish, subscribe model, think Netflix or your good old RSS feed, or designing with inheritance principles will come up. If you're not sure when to use a list versus a set or how to pick the best sorting algorithm, now is a good time to refresh. I mean, if they ask you to build a linked list, sure, it's simple on paper, but don't just jump right into the code. Start by explaining the theory. Why would you use a single linked list over a double? What are the trade-offs? They want to hear how you think, not just how fast your fingers can type. For more junior positions, expect to see questions about object-oriented programming principles, like designing something with inheritance or interfaces. Maybe they'll ask you to troubleshoot bugs like a superhero debugging bad UI problems, but don't stress if you mix up syntax though, especially if you're programming in multiple languages. We've all been there, you know. You know Java, but you've been doing Python for the last 2 years, And guess what? You'll forget half the semicolons. But if you're like me, you'll accidentally switch between C++, JavaScript, and Python all in one sentence. But that's okay. Just tell them, look, I'm great at problem solving and I can fix this if you give me a minute to Google. So here's a pro tip. Interviewers appreciate honesty over flustered fumbling. Own up to it and just move on. And another word of advice from someone who's done a few interviews, don't try to wing it. You see that job description that says proficient in Java? That's your signal to know Java like inside and out. Just because you're an expert in another OOP language doesn't mean you can fake it till you make it. Those interviewers can sniff out imposters faster than you can say null pointer exception. All right, now let's talk about the often ignored cousin of the coding interview, the behavioral interview. You might be thinking, this is a tech job. Why does anyone care if I can collaborate cross-functionally or deal with conflict? I just want to write my code. Well, my friend, let me explain to you why they care and why you should too. Behavioral interview questions are designed to figure out how you work with other humans. Because as much as we techies like to hide out in the dark in quiet rooms surrounded by code, we still have to interact with, people. Big tech companies like Google and Amazon place a huge emphasis on culture and teamwork. Why? Because even the smartest, most talented coder is kind of useless if they can't communicate or if they turn into a gremlin whenever someone suggests a change in their code. Examples of behavioral interview questions are things like, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult team member, or describe a situation where you had to overcome a challenge in a project. What they're really asking is, can you handle it when things get messy? Tech interviews aren't just about technical chops. They're about how you handle pressure, work with a team, and solve non-code related problems. In other words, they want to know, are you going to lose it when the product manager tells you to change the entire feature 2 days before the deadline? So how do you answer these questions? First, don't panic. Again, this isn't a therapy session. You don't have to spill your deepest work traumas. Instead, use what we call the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. Paint a picture of the challenge. Show what steps you took and highlight the successful outcome. For example, if they ask, tell me about a time when you had to work on a tight deadline, you might say, well, there was this one time where we had to launch a new feature in 2 weeks. I noticed that communication between the devs and the product team was slowing things down, so I organized a daily sync-up meeting to catch blockers early. Because of that, we delivered the project on time and with fewer bugs than usual. Boom. You've shown that you can take initiative, communicate effectively, and solve problems without throwing anyone under the bus. Another popular question is, how do you handle failure? This one is tricky because you don't want to say, well, I just never fail. That's a red flag. You also don't want to say, I cry into my keyboard for 3 hours. Instead, you want to say something like, when I fail, I first evaluate where things went wrong. Then I make sure to learn from it and apply those lessons moving forward. For example, and then share an actual failure story and how you turned it into a win. Behavioral questions help interviewers get a sense of whether you'll be a good fit for the team. It's not just about avoiding toxic personalities. It's about finding someone who can navigate challenges, take feedback, and collaborate effectively. So now let's shift gears to something that's just important, yet often overlooked. Doing your homework on the company itself. Because guess what? You're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. Too often, candidates go into an interview thinking, I just need to land a job. But here's the thing. Companies want to see that you're interested in them, not just interested in getting a paycheck. Doing some research on the organization shows that you're invested in what you're building and that you actually want to be part of their mission. Imagine this. You're sitting in an interview and they ask, why do you want to work here? You don't want to respond with a generic answer like, I like technology, or worse, you're hiring, so I figured, why not? Instead, dive into the specifics. Check out their latest products, projects, or even their company culture. Mention things like, I read about your latest initiative in cloud security, and I'm really excited about how I could contribute with my experience on XYZ. This kind of targeted interest makes you stand out. Another big reason to research the company. You want to know if this is the kind of place you actually want to work. Sure, the job might seem shiny from the outside, but what's the work culture like? Do they value work-life balance, or are they secretly running a work you to the bone marathon? Do they invest in career development, or is it sink or swim? From my own personal experience, I accepted a job offer based on pay, based on, a very senior title. And when I got into that environment, I was completely taken aback by the work you to the bone culture. So in my own experience, I didn't do enough research. I didn't do enough asking of the right questions, asking, how does performance management work? How do the teams align when there's a problem? What is the process or the procedure? How often are people getting called in overnight or to do 24/7 work? How often are people on pager duty? These are all very simple questions to ask, and they mean that you're really trying to see yourself there in that environment while also trying to learn exactly how that company culture operates. So again, this isn't just about landing a gig. It's about finding a place where you can grow and thrive. Tech interviews are your chance to gauge if you and the company are a good fit. After all, you're going to be spending a lot of time there, so don't be afraid to ask your own questions. At the end of the interview, they'll usually ask, do you have any questions for us? This is your moment. Don't just say, nope, I'm good. Come prepared with questions that matter to you. Ask about the team dynamic, how they handle mentorship, what their expectations are for the role. Something like, can you tell me about the team I'll be working with? How is success measured in this role? Or maybe, how does the company support continued learning or the development for its engineers? This shows that you're not just thinking about getting the job, but excelling in it and being a contributing member of the team. Companies love to see that you're thinking long term. And let's not forget, you can get some subtle insight into company culture by the way they answer your questions. If they dodge your questions about work-life balance or make it seem like career development is an afterthought, that might be a red flag. Pay attention to the vibe, because the interview is as much about you evaluating them as it is about them evaluating you. So to recap, do your research, learn about the company, its culture, its products, and its values. Show that you're genuinely interested in being part of the team, not just any team. It's a small step that can make a huge difference in how you're perceived during the interview. All right, so I gave a lot of tips and tricks, but let's see if I can show and prove. My husband and my amazing producer, who is also a software engineer, decided we should put my tips to the test. He is going to give me 3 interview questions that he did not tell me beforehand. So I'm legit a little bit nervous right now. And we're going to see if I can answer them on the spot using my own interview tips. All right, so I'm ready. Let's see how this goes.
All right. So we got our first question. I see on your resume that you have some Java experience. So I would like to see if you could tell me the difference between final, finally, and finalize.
Okay. Final is a access modifier directive that says that you can't change a variable after it's been declared final.
Okay.
Finally is the statement that is at the end of a try catch block. So it's the last statement to execute after the execution of the whole try catch block. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't remember finalize off the top of my head, but I am very sure that if I was able to grab my handy dandy Java certification book, I could quickly find that answer for you, because I don't remember it right now.
Gotcha. No worries. A lot of people don't know finalize, but it's has to do with garbage collection, and you just run that method before you do any garbage collection.
You know what? I do now remember finalize. That is definitely something. I've actually been programming much more in Python lately. And, garbage collection is definitely something that we have to think about in Java. So thank you for reminding me. Amazing.
Gotcha. Um, all right. So next question up. I see you also have a lot of team lead experience on your resume. Can you kind of describe me a time when you had to resolve a conflict between two of your team members?
Ooh, okay. As a team lead, I often have to weigh in, resolve conflicts, kind of be the decision maker of how we're going to proceed with direction. So, in the particular instance that I want to talk about today, I had one team member who wanted to take an approach for a software development architecture. And I had another team member who felt like a different approach would be better. And so ultimately, we had some time to be able to go through a full scale analysis. So I asked each team member to go through the process of designing a prototype using their architecture, but also to benchmark how quickly that architecture ran and, different resource usage, how quickly, how much memory consumption that it made, so that we could look at all angles. So they each would go ahead and prototype their particular architecture. In the end, we were able to understand that one particular implementation had faster speed, but was a little bit more memory intensive, and the other item or the other architecture selected was a little bit slower, but less memory consumption. In this particular case, we had to understand what was more valuable. Was it, faster speed? Was it less memory? And in this particular situation, as a team, we were all able to see that the initial architecture that was faster was the better architecture to choose for our specific use case. So in that case, I just went through and made sure that everybody was on the same page with understanding why we're choosing certain things, how certain requirements affect those decisions, rather than just choosing somebody's and saying we're going to go with that one because I think that's the way we should go. It was more, let's prove it out, let's resolve the conflict so that everybody's on board with the final decision.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to switch it up a little bit and go with an architecture question here. So let's say I want to migrate my on-prem data storage solution to the cloud. What considerations would you need to make before you started implementing that migration?
Okay. Honestly, you'd have to understand like what is the size and existing configuration of that data store. What is going to be available on the cloud platform as well, to understand, are we doing a whole like lift and shift? Is it going to be a physical SQL implementation on hardware that we're shifting into a cloud SQL implementation? Are we looking at cost saving opportunities? So really, you need to understand the data that you have now, as well as what is going to be the ultimate solution that you're trying to migrate to. Another thing that you kind of want to understand is what we're going to the cloud. Why are we going to the cloud? What is the motivation behind going to the cloud? Is it to have redundancy? Is it to have, duplication? Is it to do things like load balancing, right? All of those things will go into understanding why you're making certain architectural decisions for the resulting migration. And then also, what's the time? How much time do we have to do the migration? How many people are we going to have to support it? Those are some of the things I could think of off the top of my head. Were there any other considerations that you felt like, as the interviewer, you would like me to think about or take into consideration to answer this question more appropriately?
I think one consideration I would think of is how fast the data needs to be accessed, the type of searches people are going to be doing, and then how, I guess, tech inclined are the people that are going to do the searches.
Absolutely. So those types of choices would really be based on understanding the requirements for the new data store. So, access speeds, that's going to depend on what type of architecture you choose, as well as what actual database structure you're choosing. Understanding, how who's writing the queries and how good they are going to be. Or is it only DBAs that are going to be translating the queries, or are we going to give this open access to other users who can maybe run queries on top of the data, right? And that's why we would use certain things like over something like Postgres, right? Very structured database language. Can we get closer to something that's more, user language friendly? Is there going to be some type of interface over top of it? Are we going to have like some type of like Splunk built on top of it for people to be able to access that data quickly? There's a lot of things that cloud architectures make available that are more friendly for someone who's not a software developer to create custom query languages. So are we going to build a data lake where we're going to give them access to tools where they can just write freeform queries? Um, there was one other thing that you said, I think, aside from access times and who will be writing the
I guess the
query
type of
languages.
searches
Okay. I
that
still
you'd
think
want to do.
that's,
Yeah.
I still think that's also along the lines of, are we trying to do something that's very structured, traditional SQL database where it's only going to be DBAs or people who are well versed in writing queries, or are we opening it up to a larger population of people who may not be experts in how to access that data and how to get into that? And so a lot of times data lakes will be more beneficial for those users because they can write fail fast queries without like harming anything in the architecture.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, guys. I feel like I'm doing pretty okay.
Doing
You got
pretty
one
good.
more question for
I
me?
got one more
Oh
question.
gosh, I'm not ready.
So we our software that you'll be working on if you join our team is already in production, is in a production environment, and a lot of times our teams have to go in and troubleshoot. So can you tell me a time, if you've had one, where you've had to go into production because of something that broke, and kind of go through your process of troubleshooting that?
Absolutely. Um, there have been many times where I had to go into a production environment and troubleshoot issues that were happening. In one particular instance, I was new on a team, and a developer had checked in some code previously before me, and that developer was no longer in the whole company by the time that I got there. And so ultimately, you have to be very careful when doing anything on production. We waited until it was very late at night where we expected to have no active users. Number one, we could not be, messing around with things in production during the day when we knew we would have users and use cases kind of actively involved. And then it's just very careful stepping through. This was a particular web application. And so we would send queries to the web application, all things that are normal in terms of what we would expect to see regular usage. And then we'd use debug tools on the other side of that application to kind of understand what was going on. Um, Under no circumstances do I recommend that people go in and modify code on a production server until they've actually run multiple tests on that server to see how that code is behaving. And then I'd even recommend standing up an integration environment where you can mimic as close as possible as you can what's happening in production on the integration server, and then going through modifying code and deploying on the integration server first to see how your changes will impact that integration server. Obviously, integration does not always mirror production. Realistically, it's very hard. Production sometimes can have millions of data sets that you can't replicate in an integration server. It's just impossible, right? But you want to get as close to mirroring that environment on your either your integration server, so that you can see exactly how you expect that behavior to be once it gets to production. So those are my recommendations to kind of isolate troubleshooting things in a production in a live production environment so that you're not impacting your end user.
Gotcha. All right, perfect. Um, So
I
those are
hope this is the last question, y'all.
this is
'Cause I'm exhausted. I feel drained, and I feel like this feels like a real interview. So,
that was the last question.
whew.
You did amazing.
Okay,
I
thank
mean, do
you.
you have any questions for me about the company or in general?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I wanted to understand about the company was, what types of employee resource groups are at this particular company? Do you know of any that are active, and like kind of what are their missions?
I will defer that question to HR and they'll get back to you.
All right. Okay. Another question. Just, um, what is like paid time off like? How many hours of paid time off am I gonna get? And, how quickly can I use it up? Like, can I take a whole month off and use all my PTO in the first month that I'm here?
So no.
Oh,
But,
okay.
you will, after you've gone through your, like, I think it's 6 months, you'll be able to take that whole month off if you wanted to,
Okay.
if you have enough PTO available to you.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. And then lastly, how do you foresee me being a member of this team? Like, what do you think that I could bring to this role based on, the conversation that we've had and kind of what you're looking for a new hire?
One is definitely experience. I see that in your answers and in your resume, but I think mainly just a different point of view that I think our team needs, especially with somebody with your experience in all these different fields. Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was a pleasure to meet you, and I hope to hear from you guys very soon.
nice. You did good, guys, right?
All right. So I will say I was very nervous. These weren't the hardest questions that you could see. Obviously, I have no tech coding questions. He hit me with a reasonable, Java question, right? So thank you for being kind to me, my amazing producer. But also, I just really want to show people how it's okay to be transparent. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's also okay to just kind of take a moment and think about the example you want to give. You're not going to know exactly what behavioral question is going to come, and you can research them all day long. But if somebody sends you something or gives you a question that you hadn't initially planned for, take a step back, take a breath, think about what will resonate with you and what resonated with you when you kind of made it through that particular incident or that particular issue, and hopefully it'll also resonate with that interviewer. So thanks for joining us, guys. It's time to wrap up today. In a nutshell, tech interviews are designed to challenge you, but they're also designed to reveal how you think, work under pressure, and solve problems. Don't worry about being perfect. Worry about being transparent and logical. And most importantly, remember to ask yourself, do I want to work for a company that thinks I should know how many gas stations there are in the US? If you like today's episode and want to hear more about how to survive and thrive in the tech industry, make sure to hit that follow button and don't forget to leave a review. And stay tuned for our follow on episode about leveling up on salary negotiations. In the meantime, stay glowing, stay grinding, and as always, embrace the glitches. Have a good one.